Nope.
No time for tweeting.
And we're live.
Yeah.
We're also live on Audacity.
Yeah.
Or we're recording, rather.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone out there. Welcome to The Magic Box. I'm Tristan Sean Greggs, and here with Kyle the Chumley Eck. Say hi, everybody.
I hate you so much.
You can't fight stereotypes. You can only hope to embrace them.
I don't want to. I do not want to embrace that.
It's okay. You can always shave.
I could.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Anyway, I feel like we're so official here. We're on MTG Cast now.
Yep.
Really the home of Magic podcasts for what feels like forever. So as much as we are blended into the 21st century and have found our way to Twitch so we can have conversations with the live audience, we are also in podcast form, and you can find us now on MTG Cast, as well as the more up-to-date, more current, and the more information-filled Blogspot, as well as in the Twitch information. As well as
just about everywhere.
Just about everywhere. X, the technical manager.
YouTube, iTunes, blog.
Yeah,
it's all over the place.
So real quickly, we'll just go over. We are the Magic Box, which sounds weird to say, and as
this is your idea, though.
And as Edmund pointed out earlier this evening, can be taken a very different way. Yeah, but it was something that was real easy because the cube is this weird magic box. Yeah, and really, all the fun comes out of the Magic Box. And I've spent...
Not making it sound any less dirty.
No, I'm not. And I've spent so much time in so many hotel lobbies, where...
if your hotel room has a lobby, you have made it.
I've spent a lot less time there. But I've spent a lot of time with porters and bellhops and reception people, and we walk in and we have this thing, and they're always like, what is that?
Right.
And...
large mahogany shoebox.
Yeah, and the two consensuses that people came to on their own most frequently were Humidor, which I actually kind of liked. We have that many cigars.
That's a lot of cigars.
But I liked it. It's heavy. It's because they don't really realize how heavy it is. Or gun case.
Interesting.
Yeah, that we're just toting guns around.
I mean, remember when someone thought it was shoes?
That was the old box, though.
Actually, that was the old box, which was like much closer to a literal shoebox.
Yeah, there was this many moons ago. The cube was just in like a 2-row cardboard box, and we had frequented a casino, and we were coming back, and we stopped at a Denny's, and for some reason, my good friend Eck here just decided to be a dick to some nice drunk ladies as they were coming into the Denny's.
I like how every story just makes me out to be like a total asshole.
Not true at all. Remember that time you actually tipped the dealer and that other guy didn't?
Yeah.
There's a story in which you are the hero.
Right.
It was just really random and weird because we're walking out of a Denny's. We had just spent an hour in there talking about poker and magic, and we're leaving the Denny's with the cube. And it's kind of like awkwardly single file because these...
And it was like prom night in this random like trucker Denny's.
Yeah, I mean we're not in a city. We're not even really in a town. You're right.
We're at a truck stop.
Yeah, and they're coming in. We're coming out. And I believe Eck was the last one of the 4 guys that were leaving the Denny's, and he's got the box like kind of at his shoulder. And in retrospect, I can only assume that they thought there were like kittens in there or something, or bunnies or something. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know why you would even question someone leaving a Denny's at like 3 in the morning. What's in the box? Because you're only going to get a tragic answer out of that.
But she was so excited. This chick was so excited to see Eck and be like, "What's in the box?" And we did not make a Seven reference. We did not make a Saturday Night Live Lonely Island reference either. And by we, I mean Eck, because he was the only one who could really talk to this person. What did you say?
She didn't ask what was in it. She said, "Are there," like really excitedly, "Are there shoes in there?"
Wasn't that a different chick?
No, it was the same.
Oh, the same chick who proclaimed.
Are there shoes in there? And it was such a weird, off-putting question that I had not at all prepared myself to answer. That I was like, no, and we left.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have the time or mental capacity at that point to formulate
Which is so weird because you were on that day.
I know, but I had used it all up. I think.
All right. Well, this story kind of spiraled out of control.
We should get on to our
not at all about magic.
We should get on to our draft pick.
We should. I just wanted to point out, especially if it was our new MTG Cast audience, which is sure is doubling our current. Lightning Greaves does count as shoes, but that's not good enough.
That would have been a really, really niche reference to make, and I don't think she would have got it.
No. Again, if you had just yelled my dick back at her, that would have been real funny.
It would have been real funny. Again, didn't really feel like...
Yeah, it was weird. I give him it was weird.
Morning in a truck stop.
So, let's go ahead and crack a cube pack. Bring it up for everyone here. And, Eck, why don't you tell everyone at home who can't see it physically,
What
what's in
here?
said booster pack.
Alright, so our options are Exile, Thran Dynamo, Mishra's Factory, Disciple of Bolus, Sublime Archangel, Godless Shrine, Harrow, Chain Lightning, Ancient Craving, Edric Spymaster of Trest, Sliver Queen, Complicate, Avenger of Zendikar, Ancient Tomb, and Arbor Elf. And I think in this pack, I don't think this is actually a very difficult one at all.
Well, cause since it was completely random and we didn't have any time to talk about it ahead of time, and I'm now just looking at it, what is clear to you?
It's Ancient Tomb every time.
Wow. Okay.
Ancient Tomb every time.
Because I think we could definitely debate. I don't think it's ancient. I mean, I think it's definitely Ancient Tomb a non-zero amount of the time.
If this is pick one, pack one, just take Ancient Tomb, I think. Like, I like none of these cards really drive me to commit to a color or 5 of them.
Hey. I think the most important thing when I look at this pack is Dead Center is the only red card in the entire pack.
Yeah, but
in fact, this pack's kind of weird. There's a lot of brown stuff going on because there's one blue card, one red card,
one white card.
No, there's 2 white cards.
Oh, 2 white cards. Yeah.
Exile's a magic card.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just Ancient Tomb. Like, I'm always playing it. It's good everywhere. It doesn't commit you to a color. It doesn't even take up a spot in your deck because you just play as a land.
Good everywhere is a pretty bold statement. I would say
there are very few decks I'm not playing Ancient Tomb in. Very few.
Mono red, mono black.
Even then.
Maybe. I mean, to me, like, I'm on the fence about mono blue playing it.
I wouldn't play it in mono black, but I'd play it in mono red. Turn 3 Hellrider.
Sure.
Boom.
Sure.
Like,
turn 1 Ankh of Mishra.
Especially in mono red, where you don't care necessarily as much about the damage to yourself.
Man, turn 1 Ankh of Mishra on the play with this card would lead to a very exciting game of Magic.
Yeah.
That being said, I think Tomb is in my top 3 of what I would take out of this pack.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely top 3, and now I'm actually breaking it down in front of me. I don't know. I feel confident about taking a few different cards here. Like, I would be happy to take Sublime Archangel as it's the only white creature.
I mean, Godless Shrine is an easy, safe pick.
Yeah, I wouldn't take Shrine. I would take Chain Lightning over Shrine.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't know. Like,
I mean, you picked Tomb. You're allowed to pick Tomb and just stick with Tomb. I'm just thinking if there's anything else that really jumps out at me. Again, like, I could see taking Sublime Archangel or Chain Lightning if you weren't going to take Tomb. Avenger of Zendikar is a heavy commitment, not a bad card to take here either. Again, you have Harrow, Arbor Elf to get back for you. You could also kind of do something with Edric, or a deck that plays Avenger could also play cards like Silver Queen or Thran Dynamo. I think I could take Avenger. Avenger is the number 1 card I would take if I was expecting to get a quality card back on the wheel in my pack.
You're probably getting like Arbor Elf back.
You know, well, all those things considered, with an Ancient Tomb, who knows? Maybe you could get an Avenger back. That would be pretty exciting. I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be pretty exciting.
I honestly think you probably get Thran Dynamo back. Like, I don't think that card goes as high as it should, and I think you can get it back. Like,
all right.
Someone, if you've got to, like, pull 7 other cards out of this and what you would expect people to take. The guy in blue wants to take Complicate.
Well, the Complicate will be gone. The Chain Lightning will be gone. The Sublime Archangel will be gone.
The Godless Shrine will be gone.
The Godless Shrine will be gone.
Edric will be gone.
That's not a for sure.
I think it is. I mean,
I could see 1, 2, 3, 4. I could see 5 cards for sure that'll be gone out of this pack, and I think that's as many as I can say for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I just think, like, Edric is so, like, that card's good and it's flashy. People like green blue as like a color combination.
Yeah, that's fine. That doesn't mean it's always going to happen. I'm just saying, like, you can't, like, any pretty much. I mean, not any. There's a lot of 2-color gold cards. You can't say, oh, that's definitely going to be gone.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think, like, I mean, Avengers probably gone. Harrow's probably gone. Godless Shrine's gone. Music Factory might be gone.
We're not talking about might be's. We're talking about things we're sure are gone. There are 5 cards that I'm sure of.
Complicate for sure.
Yeah, it's the only blue card. It's a very good counterspell. I mean, the few things feel better in Magic than cycling Complicate. I think it's going to really... cards are only going to get better in Magic. Although cards like Complicate may never get better in Magic, because who knows. But, I mean, talking about personal Magic history, like, there was definitely a time where I had an opponent in an Onslaught constructed block match cast Decree of Silence, pump his own fist, and then cast Exalted Angel as a morph in the same turn.
You cycle Complicate.
Oh, and I cycled Complicate at it, and I got that guy. And then proceeded to untap on my own turn, unmorph my own Exalted Angel, and
kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So where are you going? You're on the shot clock.
I mean, I'm fine with Ancient Tomb. I'm just saying it's not as clean cut as that. Like, let's say I had, if I play with people I know that I'm playing with often, and I know their tendencies, I may take the Chain Lightning, banking on being able to send a clear signal to people on my left, and also be able to pick up clear cards from the people on my right. I might take Sublime Archangel, because that card is just bonkers with the white tokens deck.
Yeah.
And if I'm, sitting next to people on my right that like to draft control all the time, I'd like to have that card. Ancient Tomb is fine. I could definitely see that being... I'm going to take it. There's nothing wrong with taking it. There's not a strong argument against it. This is my point.
Yeah, like, it doesn't commit you to anything. You're going to play it in 95% of the decks that you draft.
And we should be talking about vacuums. We're talking about it in a vacuum there. Yeah. All right. Well, that was mildly exciting. Yeah. I felt like we more got to rank a few cube cards than we did get to go through a true pick-a-pack. But let's talk about today's main topic. I had been thinking about, I get a lot of questions from people about how I feel about draft orders, how you feel about archetypes, build-arounds, and kind of the obvious path to go when talking about Cube is like, well, let's break down every color and talk about every color in an episode, which is well and good. I think we'll get to the point where we'll do that. I'll try to make it relevant, make it a 2013 applicable version of that.
We'll have broken it down so deep, we'll have a show all about, 1-mana spells and then 2-mana spells.
That is good.
And then we'll just keep going more and more. I mean, so, yeah, people... And what we're going to talk about today is, color combinations.
So that was my thing.
And how they work together.
Instead of starting with just strict, let's spend an episode on blue, let's spend an episode on red, let's try to combine it with people talking about, how do I draft this thing? How do I evaluate these cards? How do I build a deck in that kind of way? So that being said, let's tie it all into what's current in Magic right now. Let's talk about guilds, let's talk about Ravnica. So that being said, as I keep saying that, as I'm stumbling over my own words, anyway, we're going to talk about allied guilds today. We're going to talk about how you can draft them, the most common, popular, pretty much successful archetypes within those guilds. Now, again, they're not guilds like you would draft in Ravnica. They don't, you don't need to find all the Unleashed guys. You don't need to find...
And this should also be, as a forewarning, this is kind of a general thing. Your mileage may vary depending on the type of cube that you have that you're playing with. Every cube list is slightly different, which is going to kind of change some of these evaluations to some degree. So this is kind of just a general.
It's a generalization, and again, the audience knows it applies to my own particular cube because that's what we talk about. Who knows? One thing I like about it is, as much as we talk about the cube we play with, it's so large it kind of opens up opportunities for whatever cube you draft at home.
Yeah.
I missed that card. I'd be interested in trying that card out. Or I'd like to try that stuff out. Yeah. So let's just go right into it. Let's talk about Azorius in cube. And we'll talk about it in the most broadest of terms, being
white cards and blue cards.
I opened up a booster pack. I took a Swords of Plowshares because that's a really powerful, one of the best cards in cube. And then I got the next pack passed to me, and I saw a Factor Fiction. And I took a Factor Fiction, and I was like, oh, that's a really good card. And then, I took a Wrath of God, and then, I took a Counterspell.
Yeah.
So you're pretty much just although that maybe is a little too much information.
We have a Hallowed Fountain.
You take a single white card, you take a single blue card.
We have a Tundra in the middle of it.
Sure. Where can you kind of go with this? Because again, we're not advocating, open up a draft, immediately take a card and go blue-white. I don't think there's a single card that screams that.
I mean, I think the thing about blue-white is, for the most part, the most obvious deck, what most of the cards work well for, and is a pretty strict control, traditional wraths, counter spells kind of deck.
I'm going to agree with you here, but its win conditions aren't as traditional as they would have been in the greater picture of Magic. 20 years ago, the first deck that won a Pro Tour was...
You're not winning with, like, Sarah Angels.
Or Millstones.
Right. You're winning with Planeswalkers or Elish Norn.
So that's one of the things to talk about. Once we'll say Azorius Control is the first archetype we'll talk about. Now, in that kind of deck, you're going to be playing double blue and double white cards. You're going to be playing lots of board sweepers, lots of counter magic, and then your win conditions are generally more expensive.
Few and far between.
They're big haymakers, so you need to evaluate cards as such. Cards that are going to push me into that kind of deck are probably...
the cheap removal.
Yeah,
like Path and Swords are both.
But those go into so many decks. Like that's not a clear sign to me that I want to play.
I see.
Like those would. I'm just saying cards that I would pick up early in the draft that would push me towards playing a blue-white control deck. Those cards would be Wrath of God, Day of Judgment, Winds of Wrath on the white side, Counterspell, Mana Drain,
Jace of any
Jace's Ingenuity, any Jace,
any card with the word Jace in it.
Planeswalkers are really big win conditions for the blue-white decks nowadays. Like, if you take the original control decks of Magic that were blue-white and one with Millstone, and you replace the Millstone and Millstone-type effects with just Planeswalkers, that could be kind of the makeup of a lot of the blue-white decks in the format.
Like, you're looking to stall the game as long as you can, avoid taking damage, clear out a bunch of their stuff, draw a ton of cards, counter your opponent's spells, and then kind of win however... once it gets to like...
Your win conditions can be a little more varied in a blue-white control deck because it's generally one of the better decks to kind of take care of everything. You have Detention Sphere, Oblivion Ring, Fate's Fetters. You have answers to all the different permanent types. I think if I was going to name creatures that you would win the game with most often, it would be Sphinx of Jawar Isle, Palinchron, Akroma, Angel of Wrath. Those are all things that you can... kind of do as far as creatures go, but a lot of times you're gonna win with Gideon Jura, you're gonna win with Elspeth Night Errant, you're gonna win with
winning
Elspeth
with Gideon
Tyrell.
Jura is really common in that kind of deck.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I like Decree of Justice is another example, especially because like it works so well in like the blue-white shell where you have a lot of counter magic and you don't necessarily want to be tapping out on a lot of turns because you're holding up. You've got a couple counter spells. You've got a card draw spell that you might want to cast, and then you have Decree. So, okay, my opponent played something. I'll counter it. Oh, he didn't play anything. Okay, tap out, make 12 soldiers, attack twice.
Yeah, that kind of came up briefly in our Versus episode last week. We talked about cards like Deep Analysis versus Jason's Ingenuity.
Yeah.
Again, your favor one towards those kind of control decks. So, I think the two things to point out were. Or one thing about all of these different decks and archetypes is how highly you evaluate fixing, and then what cards early in the draft are going to kind of gear you that direction, or should you have just taken them in general, what you want to look for.
I think in the white-blue deck, fixing is pretty important, but it's not an absolute make or break. Like, I played plenty of white-blue decks that are just islands and plains.
Agreed.
Like, it's more important that you have access to double blue and the rare triple blue, Cryptic Command Teferi.
In that regard, it much more depends on the cards you drafted. Just talking about...
Well, that's certainly true.
Just talking about Azorius Control, just like, more in the general terms.
You're almost assuredly going to want access to more blue than white.
Not necessarily.
It
really comes down to whatever cards you get. I'm just saying, on a scale of 1 to 10... in blue-white control, what would you rank drafting fixing as a priority?
3 or 4.
I agree. Pretty low.
Yeah.
Pretty low. That's really what we're getting at.
Yeah.
And as we go through, we'll just kind of... We'll try to use that scale.
It's certainly good, but it's not make or break. Like, it doesn't... Oh, I want to play white-blue, but I can't because my mana doesn't work.
Right.
Like, that very rarely happens.
And one thing that's important to point out with MyCube is because we try to keep some symmetry, especially with mana fixing, we don't want one color or one combination of colors to be have more access than the others. The Worldwake Manlands, which are so great for allied colors, come in on that side. But since there's no enemy variant of those, the enemy color combinations have access to the Eventide filter lands. Thusly, since there's parity there, the Shadowmoor ones aren't in the cube. So the allied color combinations, you could say, have a bit of a disadvantage because they don't have access to Mystic Gate and Dark...
right.
Not Dark Depths. What is the blue-black one?
Oh.
Sunken Ruins, there we go. So it's going to be harder to go from Cryptic Command into Necropotence, or Cryptic Command into Wrath of God, or White Sun Zenith.
At the same time that they get sweet beaters on land.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a fine trade-off.
Especially good in white-blue.
Yeah.
Like, Celestial Colonnade is excellent in that deck.
So, mana fixing for the blue-white decks in general, pretty low. As far blue-white control decks is pretty low.
Yes.
As far as cards that you would look for to push you into this archetype, Counter Magic and Board Sweepers from those two colors. Moat is usually very good there. It kind of at least lets you save your counter spells for things that might deal with Moat or go over it. And again, when I'm talking about win conditions, I like Sphinx of Jor-El, Chroma Angel of Wrath, Gideon's and Elspeth's.
Elish Norn.
Elish Norn is a good one, yeah. And it's funny because in the actual Azorius cards in Cube, not a whole lot of them really go into this deck. I mean, it's an Overrule.
No. Well, yeah. I mean, Overrule's fine.
But even a card like Grand Arbiter, I'm not super amped to play in the control decks because there's so few bodies that he kind of has a big target on his face.
Right, and he doesn't actually do a whole ton. Like, if you're shaving them in off your counter spells that sweep, but very rarely.
Well, Sphere of Resistance your opponent is a big deal.
Like, spearing them is good, but again, he doesn't tend to live very long.
And even the Venser Planeswalker isn't spectacular, but it's a Planeswalker, it's fine.
So, but that Venser Planeswalker, however, leads into the other sweet white-blue
I'd say there are 3 blue-white archetypes.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I would say 2.
You would say 2? Well, we'll get there. So I would say there's control, there's aggro, and then there's, value combo almost.
I think the aggro value guy archetype is one thing, because there's just such a small amount of actual aggro.
I think
for white-blue specifically.
Well, it's most... So, okay, we'll segue right into aggro blue-white, aggro Azorius, which is primarily whites, cheap, efficient value creatures, backed up by blues... Disruption, and that's going to be disruption that's easy to cast.
Yeah.
Because, again, you don't want to... in a deck like this, mana fixing is going to be not as high a priority for you, because you're going to make sure you get all the Savannah Lions, you're going to make sure you get the Repeal, the Mana War, these kind of early creatures that also have value to them that kind of disrupt the tempo pace of the game. Because again, with a blue-white deck, you're not going to be like, oh, well, I have all the Lightning Bolts and Terrors. Instead, I have the Mana Leak, the Memory Lapse, the Daze. I have those kind of spells. And that deck can be very effective because it kind of attacks all the other decks from a different angle, where you don't get the traditional, I'm going to play creature, attack you, or I'm going to play nothing, counterspell, something.
Right.
The blue-white creature deck or aggressive deck gets to kind of do both, and nothing is sweeter than being like Savannah Lions, Cloistered Youth, Mana Leak, Aven Mind Sensor, Memory Lapse, kind of get in there with the beats. And to me, that's what the aggressive blue-white deck is.
See, I just don't know. I mean, the biggest problem with putting that deck together in a purely I want to be an aggressive deck that plays white and blue cards is that you get no help on the blue side for being aggressive. You get disruption, sure, but there is, other than I would say Vendilion Click, there is not really any blue cards that are aggressively minded that play well with 2/1s for 1.
Other than
counterspells.
But when you say blue cards that are aggressively minded, you mean to say blue creatures?
Yeah, I mean obviously there are blue cards that are fine, bounce and things like that, but so many of blue's guys are either value guys or slow. You've got Click, 3 power flyer for 3, very good. Got Geist in the 2-color combo.
Yeah, this is clearly where that card shines.
Yeah, but there's not. I mean, there's no whatever.
I don't know whatever.
Well, I mean, there's very few blue creatures that have there's no Phantasmal Bear and stuff like that. Stuff that's designed.
I think what you mean to say is that blue has very few creatures that cost less than 4 to begin with. Blue already has the fewest creatures of anybody.
Yeah.
Then it already has very few creatures that cost less than 4.
Mm-hmm.
And they aren't necessarily all aggressive. Maybe you have a card like Gilded Drake.
Right.
Which it could just be a liability.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's hard to find blue creatures that are effective in the blue-white aggressive deck. I agree with you.
Yeah.
A lot of the aggression has to come out of the white.
Right.
Now, blue, again, Vendilion Click is a great card. Calcite Snapper, I think, is a great card in this deck as well. We're talking about a 4-power Shrouded Narcomoeba. Not Narcomoeba. Aquamoeba.
There you go.
those cards are great, but again, they're double blue. They're not going to be as consistent. It's not necessarily what you want to do in Far of the Curve. It's interesting because you're going to be drafting the Savannah Lion type creatures highly, and you're going to be backing them up with cheap counter magic and hopefully card draw. Like, this is a deck that's also going to get a lot of mileage out of Compulsive Research, Factor of Fiction, Thirst for Knowledge. But yeah, it's doing a lot of its attacking with white, but that's okay with me.
I mean, I also think that if you're drafting that deck, you need to value the blue side of things higher, like the disruption, more so than... So, like, the white berries are very important, like Savannah Lions, Elite Vanguard, Sarah Avenger, whatever.
They're going to be the way you win the game, yeah.
Right. But most of those cards are lower down on people's draft priority or what they really want to do or where they think they should be. So you can get them on the wheel a lot of times.
That's not a guarantee.
I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but I'm saying, like, part of trying to figure out what's important in a draft strategy is figuring out what you need to take now because it won't come back and what you can take a risk on because it will come back. Or more often than not will come back. And a lot of times, things like Savannah Lions and Elite Vanguard will come back.
But that's not a guarantee.
I
don't... when I'm
You're
drafting...
right. There is no guarantee that any card you draft will ever come back.
Or don't draft?
Don't draft, yeah. Every card you want could be taken by everyone else in a draft. However, a lot of times, you can... I feel pretty safe in assuming that Savannah Lions will table.
More likely than Memory Lapse.
Yes.
Or Mana Leak.
Especially Mana Leak.
Yes, if you see Savannah Lions versus Mana Leak in this particular set of circumstances...
I'm taking Mana Leak.
Not every day of the week,
no.
But maybe. If it's pack 3 and I still need more of those white creatures, I'm going to take Savannah Lions. That's my whole point. You can't just go from generalization to...
No, I mean,
100%.
obviously you need to draft around what your deck needs and what your deck wants, and you have to be able to analyze it and look at it on the fly. But if it's early on, you're still in the formative phase of putting this thing together, I think the harder thing to reach the proper threshold of is disruption.
I can give you that.
It's much easier to have a wealth of cheap, aggressive white creatures than it is to have a wealth of efficient, easy-to-cast, disruptive blue cards. Because they're just going to be more popular and work in more decks.
So my commentary on that would be that I have had far more decks that have had a successful win rate with 90% white cards creature-based, touching on blue for card advantage and disruption, than the reverse, where I have a blue heavy disruption deck that doesn't necessarily have win conditions, and somehow ends up relying on cheap white creatures, which has happened. It's been unfortunate where you've been like, I've got Counterspell, Swords of Plowshares, things that go around that, but I didn't get the Planeswalkers, I didn't find them high enough. You know who that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyway. Let's rank it here. As far as mana fixing goes, on a scale of 1 to 10 for the blue-white aggressive deck, I would probably bump it up to like a 4 to 5.
Yeah, I would say 5. I think it's more important because
it's still middle of the road. Like, this isn't a deck that's very color intensive.
No, but a lot of the spells that you want are going to be either turn 1 white or double white. Like, yeah. It kind of shifts from, like, a lot of the cards that work well in the control version are double blue, and a lot of the cards that work well in the aggressive version are double white. Especially early.
And again, I think the trend you'll find with all the aggressive decks we're going to talk about is that you're going to want to stay away from as much of the double mana requirement in any of the aggressive decks as you will find.
Yeah.
That's the goal. I mean, there are going to be some that are going to be a little more heavy. You're going to find a workaround, or who knows. I do like strawberries, thank you. But who doesn't? I mean, unless you're allergic to them.
Yeah. That's like kind of a home run. Everybody likes them.
But you don't actively pursue them.
I'm not actively hunting strawberries.
No. Just on the audio side of this, people have no idea how we're segueing. No. Okay.
That's why you gotta watch it live.
You gotta watch it live.
All right. So
the low on the viewer count today. It's such a shame.
So the other suite, if we want to call it a third archetype, is...
Are we done? Are we done with blue-white aggressive?
I think so.
Now let's quickly. I mean, we've talked about most of the cards that you would be kind of pulling into your pile to get into this deck, but let's say you open up a pack where you first pick Mana Leak, then you took a Swords of Plowshares, then you took maybe an Elspeth. Elspeth still works in this deck. It's a Knight Errant. Yeah, I know. It's a white card. You take it.
Yeah.
But then you get like the Savannah Lions, the Gideon's Lawkeeper, the Memory Lapse, the Repeal. These cards coming together. Definitely start to look for that blue-white aggressive shell. And in the aggressive shell, you probably don't want to go past 5 mana on things. And 5's got to be real good. It's got to be Cloudguard Ranger. It's got to be Treachery. It's got to be Jace's Ingenuity, maybe. I mean, again, like most aggressive decks.
Cloudguard Ranger, especially, is a boss.
All right, so the last, and I think you can now agree, clearly different than the two we mentioned before.
Sure.
Is a little more combo-y. It's definitely the trickiest. It's definitely the most fun of all the blue-white.
It is one of the most fun archetypes in all of Cube, in fact.
It is. It's the value. Fingers crossed, every time you can draft this, you have the Revelark.
Basically, the Revelark deck, whether or not you have Revelark.
Yeah, that one, we're talking like Venser, both Vensers, Parallax Wave, Flicker Wisp, Blade Splicer,
Gale Powder Mage,
Sun Titan,
Cloudgoat Ranger.
Yeah, Spellskite goes up in value there.
Like, Magar of Karandor, Restoration Angel,
anything that's slipping and sliding stuff in and out of the battlefield, anything that has entered the battlefield triggers that's going to be positive for you.
Karmic Guide.
Oh, yeah, Karmic Guide's huge. Phyrexian Metamorph, all the clones that go with those things, the infinite Revelark loops. I mean, we could go on for days about Revelark decks. But the blue-white ones are the best ones. They have access to the most tools, the most tricks. Again, they're generally white-based. Most of the blue spells you want there are single blue, which is really nice.
It's also just the fact that most of the slide, like Astral Slide, Blink effects are white. You know, Gale Powder Mage, Restoration Angel, Flicker Wisp, Parallax Wave. So there's just, for the most part, you just end up base white, and then you go into blue for things like Mana War and...
Vendilion Click can be gross, especially at the Caracas.
Oh, yeah.
Gilded Drake just steals all your opponent's guys in this particular color combination and archetype. It's gross. Again, if you have the Venser as a Sojourner Planeswalker with a card like Parallax Wave or even Gilded Drake, any of these things, it just goes...
Or just like Venser, the guy.
Yes, Venser with Venser is extremely good. It's a spectacular one, and it's one that's pretty easy to know how you're going to want to evaluate cards when you start getting early picks like Parallax Wave, Venser, Revelark.
If you see Revelark,
then
it's like green light.
I'm pretty sure Revelark goes into every single deck that I ever draft, so it doesn't really matter.
I don't know about every single deck, but
oh my god, it's one white. It's so easy.
Play it black-green.
So yeah, I mean, as far as fixing goes, it's kind of the same. I would say it's almost like a 3 out of 10 again.
Yeah, I mean, you're almost... Most of those decks are almost, like, entirely white, with some blue. It's like not... I would say it's not even half and half a lot of times.
This is not a half and half kind of deck. It's definitely more of a base white thing than a blue thing. I've definitely, again, none of these are absolutes. I've had a blue deck with a lot of good blue cards. It just happens to have some of the Revelark components in it.
Splashing Revelark.
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
And again, you know what a mono blue deck looks like. You know what lots of counter magic, lots of card draw, lots of let's not make any friends kind of cards look like. Those are the things you're going to want to be playing and have access to.
All right.
So that covers Azorius.
Now,
we talked about a lot of the cards that you would want to be picking early that would push you into that deck.
Yeah. Now let's go to... let's hit a button on the
Eck thought he was cool. Celestia. And for Celestia... I can't remember if I initially said there were 2 or 3 popular decks for this one. We'll just wing it.
I would say the most common green-white deck is largely ramp-based.
And why would you say that?
I just think that, especially in Green's cards in Cube, like, White tends to either err on, like, really aggressive stuff or, pretty heavily controlled. It's Savannah Lions of Wrath of God,
Not a lot of room in between.
For the most part, it's your aggressive guys that you're looking to beat down with, or you're looking to play the long game with control. And I think that the way Green is currently set up, Green doesn't really help the aggressive side of White that well. Most of Green's early plays in the Cube are Glanwar Elves, Harrow's Rampant Growths, mana accelerants of all kinds.
We can kind of touch on Green's color identity in the Cube to kind of get a better understanding in general. Over the years we've moved away from the Pouncing Jaguar type cards and gone more almost strictly to the Land of War Elf type cards. Thinking that a lot more of Green's power comes through its ability to speed past everyone else, rather than kind of mash up bigger and better on the battlefield, which is more of a traditional green color identity thing. It's not so much in Cube because, again, we're looking at the history of Magic where the green cards really were shining, and that's much more on the ramp side than the my man 6/6 3 mana, you man 5/5 4 mana, me better.
I mean, one of the things that like I like doing, if you're green white, typically what you end up a lot of times is you have a lot of accelerants. You're base green because you want the Landmore Elves, the
well, let's just keep it as a marriage of these colors, because we know what green does.
Right.
But what makes green white? Like, I still think there's at least two color combinations.
I think there are two.
So we'll stick with ramp.
You're using green's ramp to get into a lot of white's top-end Haymaker cards.
And there aren't that many these days.
There's not a ton of them, but I think that you're supplementing it with white's cheap removal, things like Swords, Path, Journey to Nowhere.
Again, O-Ring, these Fate's Fetters. Like, white has so much of the good, just kind of like across the board removal.
It's so difficult for green to deal with non-artifact, non-enchantment cards in Cube. It just doesn't, other than it doesn't really have, other than Beast Within, there's not a ton of stuff to deal with creatures. There's stuff like that.
Yeah,
So you use being able to use white as okay, while I'm ramping and putting a bunch of lands into play, I can play this cheap white removal at the same time without really messing anything up.
So that would
deal with what my opponent is
That
doing.
would make me think that you're leaning a little bit more away from green with the creature side of the ramp and more of the spell side of green's ramp.
I mean, I think you can go either way with it. I think that the majority of green's ramp cards are not necessarily affecting the board in a significant way.
Well, they're definitely not.
So,
they're affecting the board by putting mana sources on the battlefield.
Right. But so, a lot of times, especially if you're playing against an aggressive opponent, you need to be able to buy yourself time so that all of your sweet accelerants can let you drop Haymakers to catch back up. And I think cards like, the cheap white removal and the ability for white to buy you time to let all of your ramp cards be effective is more like where I see that pairing.
Okay, so it boils down to green-white. One of the basics is the ramp deck.
Yeah,
I mean, green. Pretty much when we touch on all of these things, it's going to be what green ramps with, because that's what's really good at. Green does do other things, but that's kind of its best. Yeah. Maybe its moniker right now. That being said, I do like more of the spell side. I'm going to value the Rampant Growths, the Farseeks, the Kadama's Reaches higher. That way I can play my Winds of Wrath, Wrath of God cards and not lose all my mana elves that I've been trying to ramp stuff into. Now again, White's Haymakers, while there are fewer these days, it's not so much about Eternal Dragon Yosai. We've kind of upgraded. We've got Elish Norn. We've still got Akroma.
Sun Titan.
Guys, so good. Kind of all these things in between. You do want to be able to ramp into those. It's a great opportunity to tooth and nail. The green-white deck is one of the best ones to try to just hardcast Eldrazi with, because again, you're not going to necessarily have a lot of the card draw effects outside of cards like Harmonize, but you're going to have lots of ramp and board sweepers, where the other green ramp kind of color combinations aren't going to have as strong of removal as white, which seems maybe weird. It's not green-black, it's not red-black with the removal colors. It's just sweepers. Again, who knows? Moat can even be good in that deck. It's less likely.
It's hard to win in a green-white deck when you're playing Moat. It's tricky.
You just Terrasted on an attack, or Beast within an attack.
Sure.
But you can literally disenchant it and attack.
Yes, you could literally disenchant it and attack.
So yeah, I think that's ramp is definitely something. I mean, you have Mirari's Wake. It's right there. Yeah. There it is.
And Mirari's Wake is actually also good in the other green-white archetype, which I feel is pretty common, which is the Tokens deck.
Tokens deck, which I think is different from the aggro deck, and I think that's where I feel like there's three. Let's step back briefly and talk about the two things I want to touch on. One is we're going to rank mana fixing in this.
Well, I mean,
on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're drafting green-white ramp, how highly are you taking mana fixing?
I mean, I'm not really taking it that high.
On a scale of 1 to 10.
Oh my god, fine. 0, 1, whatever. The
Okay.
lowest number.
Okay.
Because all of your spells get you the land you need anyway. You
I
don't
will
need
agree.
to go out of your way for it.
I will agree.
I'll take the lowest value on the scale.
That would be 1.
Okay. We don't go to 0?
We're somehow
1.
fighting the scale. Again, you're going to need green early, but green is going to find you the stuff is going to be fixing. It's not hard to lean towards forest, but still have Wrath of Gods in your deck, because you're going to find ways to get double white real easy.
Yeah.
So when you see those Temple Gardens and such, you're okay shipping them.
Yeah, not a big deal.
Exactly.
Cannabis Reach gets all your colors.
And then key cards that I would look to push me into this deck type.
Any of the sweet accelerants. Oracle.
But then we gotta go a little bit past that, because the green, like when I see a Cultivate in a pack and I take it, it's gonna take a few more cards for me to be like, okay, I want to play green white ramp, because a card like Cultivate is so wide open.
Or like Wake, like Mirari's Wake.
Mirari's Wake could be one of those cards. Like let's say I got a Tooth and Nail, and then I got an Elish Norn.
Sure, I mean like any of the big white bomb guys.
Yeah, because I think it's not like a. I'm not as inclined to play Elish Norn in a just Tooth and Nail deck.
Yeah.
I want to be able to cast it and have it be good when you cast it.
Yeah, I think it's important in most Tooth and Nail decks that you're able to actually play the stuff that you could be Tooth and Nailing, even if it's like mildly unrealistic.
Like first pick Sun Titan, second pick Raphalos.
That's bold. But yeah, sure.
I mean, yeah, it's a little bold, but it could definitely happen.
Bold. Yeah.
So those are cards you'd want to find. Again, it's probably the best way to kind of generalize it is big mana green and white spells.
Yeah.
That are going to be good. Again, we've Swords of Plowshares, Path to Exile, premium cube cards. You're just going to be taking them.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, well, now I have a Path to Exile to go with my Raphalos. Maybe I'll draft green-white ramp.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
All right, so now let's move into the kind of the token strategy. I would almost call this the Township kind of deck.
Right.
This is where
Township shines here. Mirari's Wake again shines here.
And Mirari's Wake is a little bit more of the, I would say, the top of the curve for that deck.
Yeah.
You want to go...
I would say 5 is like pretty much the top.
I mean,
of it.
you could pretty much summarize this deck in a handful of cards. The two most important being like Cloud Goat Ranger, Deranged Hermit.
I was about to say those exact things.
Obviously,
like,
we're on the same page here.
But I mean, you can even go deeper than that. Other green and white token makers, Spectral Possession potentially,
Geist Honored Monk, even like Lingering Souls. Was again, you're playing green. You're probably going to find a way to flash it
even
back.
Battle Screech.
Yeah, Battle Screech is really a good card
on
in
the slower side, but Squirrel Nest.
Mm-hmm.
On the really expensive side, Avenger of Zendikar.
Right.
I mean, there are just so many cards in green and white that put a ton of random dorks in play. Like you can really, really take advantage of that with stuff like, Gowney Township, Mirari's Wake, Craterhoof Behemoth is also a hilarious one.
Yeah, if you can find a way to get there. Yeah.
If you can get there, Craterhoof Behemoth is the
KO
punch.
You don't usually need it. This is a deck where something like Gaddock Teague is a great shields up kind of maneuver.
Yeah. Gaddock Teague really shines here.
Sure, all the Army in a Can cards are really good, but it's also nice to kind of have that extra kind of barrier when you're trying to commit a little bit more to maybe break through a stall or just kind of finish the game immediately. Because we don't run cards as kind of bland as Overrun.
Yeah.
I mean, I
don't
know if you feel like I work for it a little bit more, or just Overrun drawing it when there isn't anything on the board is like one of the worst feelings.
Triple green.
That's not a big deal. We're playing green. Yeah. Card can cost 6 different colors of mana. It doesn't matter.
That would be very difficult to cast.
So this isn't really a mid-range deck. You kind of want to curve up in tokens.
I mean, to a degree. I think if I had to classify it, I would consider it mid-range. Because most of your solid plays are from...
Most of the things that generate lots of tokens are going to cost 4 to 6 mana.
Right. 3, 4, 5, 6 are your sweet spot. And that's kind of like if you were to lay out a good green-white tokens deck, the curve is going to get very wide at especially 4 and 5.
So it's a little bit more mid-rangey. It means you're going to evaluate cards kind of like Deadbridge Goliath a little bit higher. Maybe cards like Honor of the Pure Crusade start to go up in value because you have more of the white tokens than the green token production.
Pyrrhic Wildspeaker is also excellent in this deck.
Yeah, because there's your Overrun right there.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of drafting this deck, it's more about knowing when to draft for what part of the curve.
Yeah. It's very easy to, even if you realize, okay, I've got cards that are sweet for green-white tokens, and I am going to pull the trigger on it. You could sit there and take every card that is awesome for the deck and end up with mono 5-drops.
Which is awkward. And that's a lot of the traps in drafting Cube in general, is when you see something really cool that you really like, going a little bit too overboard on it and not stopping to think like, oh yeah, I'm drafting a deck that's got to be playable. It's just going to be like,
Yeah.
I'm going to cast this, and then I'm going to cast this, and then I'm going to cast this, and everything's going to, it all costs the same, so you're never going to get there.
Yeah.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, mana fixing for the green-white tokens deck.
Not a big deal. Not a huge deal.
Maybe a 2 out of 10?
I go 3.
All the way up to 3.
A lot of the good white token producers are double white, and this is a deck where a lot of times you don't necessarily have the room or the desire to be playing stuff like Kodama's Reach and Cultivate. You want most of your cards being guys that make more guys, and like you don't want to be spending turns just putting lands into play. So stuff like Temple Garden, Horizon Canopy.
And also think that you may be able to touch on something for Wolfron.
Yeah, I mean, you little splash,
Raging Ravine.
splash here and there,
Yeah.
Is relevant.
That's the one nice thing about when we talk about drafting any of the green decks is that you're going to get kind of a freebie to touch a third color if you need to. And something we didn't even talk about in the green-white ramp deck is you can just kind of casually have the land fireball in the form of Wolfrun.
Yeah, and I think, Township is ideal.
Yeah.
But, again...
I don't think there's a pack in Cube where I would be first picking Township.
No.
But it quickly moves up the pick order for you.
If you have, Deranged Hermit and, Blade Splicer or something, or even, so bold as to have Cloudgut Ranger or Elspeth Tyrell, who is excellent in the tokens deck.
And again, with the tokens decks, we're always trying to get more value out of those mana guys we're taking so early that, it's like, oh, you're not playing the Jungle Lions in Cube anymore, you're only playing the Elves of Deep Shadow, and how is that better for you? Where are you making up for the aggressive side of green? Cards like Township are really bringing up the rear there to bring it back to the front, where it's kind of like, well, I've died to a 5/5 Llanowar Elf.
It happens. I mean, green, I think green is better suited as the most powerful mid-range color.
That is a bold statement.
I think green has aggressive cards in it. It's you could make there is certainly an argument to have your green creature base in Cube be Pouncing Jaguar, Jungle Lion, the
Albino Troll.
You go super cheap.
Simian Grunts.
Super cheap. Super.
I go for the Mono Echo. Sorry.
Right. Also cards that have been in Cube in the past.
Yeah, they've all been there.
But I think, especially with the cards that they, have printed recently in green, and kind of the way you can structure it by having mana guys as the early part of the curve in terms of what's available to green, and then all of its 4 and 5 mana creatures are just such awesome bombs that just affect the game state so significantly.
They either go huge or they go wide.
Right. It's either Deranged Hermit or Thragtusk or Deadbridge Goliath. You're either playing the biggest guy on the board or you're putting so many on the table at once. And I think that's just a better use of green in Cube than going Jungle Lion.
No, I completely agree. I mean, we've made that clear. So we've ranked mana fixing for the mid-range tokens style. As far as cards, pretty clear. If it makes tokens and it's in these two colors, those are the things you're going to be looking for to go down this path.
It says put 3 of anything into.
But again, don't get too overzealous on it because you're going to want to be able to fill in the rest of the curve down low. Cards like Fiend Hunter are still good. I mean, this was kind of almost a standard deck from the last 18 months, so people are a little more familiar with this strategy. Then last but not least, we'll bring it all the way down to aggro in green-white. I still think aggro and green-white is very much a thing, and I think that cards that green-white aggro value higher and get more out of than, let's say, blue-white aggro are going to be cards like Equipment, because you're going to have those mana creatures that now can kind of, instead of, if they're not attacking or if they're not casting something big, they can pay for those equip costs, get those swords onto creatures, move that Batterskull Skull around, do things like that you're still getting value out of your mana creatures in late turns. But you're still playing all the low-end stuff. And you also, you can just kind of casually mise a Plow Under on somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely agree with you in the sense that this is a place where Equipment shines. And not that there are a ton of them, this is also where enchant creatures are also great. The white-green aggressive deck is a great place to have Rancor.
Yep.
Being able to
have the most targets for it is...
you have a ton of targets for it, and you want to be aggressive anyway,
You get a lot of utility of a card like Green Sun Zenith. Green Sun Zenith is possibly its best here. Knight of the Reliquary,
Yeah.
Kusali Pride Mage, Kitchen Fangs,
If you're lucky, Dryad Arbor.
Gaddock Teague, Loxodon Smiter.
Yeah, I mean,
Like all the green-white cards that are green-white in Cube.
almost all of them are very aggressive in nature.
Ooh, is that today's keyword? I do like that. Drink when you hear the word casually. That's something we need to set up for later, is the Pee-wee's Playhouse
Pee-wee's magic
style... what's the magic word?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get a large bell to ring.
Yeah.
But I think that equipment's definitely sweet here because you're just going to end up with a bunch of noble hierarchs and birds and random little mana dorks, kind of no matter what you're trying to do. And
That's what a lot of greens creatures that cost less than 4 are. So.
Yeah, so like having the ability, like, well, you know, I'm not really doing a whole lot with my mana once I get to 5 or whatever, but I can slap equipment on these random Arbor Elf and go to town with it.
Township is also very powerful in that regard as well. If you think about it, that you're going to get to 5 mana a lot with this deck.
Township's a bit more of a liability in the more aggressive side because a lot of your creatures are going to be really early drops, and like the fact that
color committal,
like a lot of color commitment, yeah. Like the fact that Township taps for colorless is going to like hurt you more often the more aggressive you are.
Well, that leads us right into, on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you consider the mana fixing priority for a green-white aggro deck?
I would go like 5, potentially even higher than that.
Higher than 5?
Like it's pretty important to be able to, especially if you're going to be on like the Savannah Lions Elite Vanguard plan, but also have
Strangleroot Geist?
Like, yeah.
Yavimaya Elder?
Yeah, I mean, like, Strangleroot Geist, Sarah Adventure in the same deck or something.
You do know there is no more Sarah Adventure.
Oh, what?
There is no more Sarah Adventure. We're trying to cut down on the double white commitment.
Silver Knight. Strangleroot Geist.
Sounds like you want to trade out Silver Knight for Sarah Avenger.
Maybe. So, like, you're going to have just a lot more double green, double white early spells, and because of the nature of you being aggressive, if you stumble or have awkward mana problems early, they're going to hurt you a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just need... Like, the deck benefits so much more from the Savannas, from the Temple Gardens, etc., than a lot of other decks. And that, like, one of the best cards, like, in that... I mean, obviously it's good in a lot of places, but Noble Hierarch, being able to tap for green and white and pump an attacker.
Noble Hierarch is good in a lot of decks.
Yeah, it's good in a lot of decks, but like here is a place where it really shines, especially if you have any kind of like coincidental reason to splash blue, like maybe you picked up Geistesate Draft, and you know, or something like that. You know, like not a huge amount of blue, or just like maybe you got the Trigon Predator, or you know something like that.
The Edric, which you love so much.
Edric, yeah. There's a lot of cards where like, oh well, you know, you just randomly have like a little tiny bit of blue. And it lets you play like 1 or 2 very powerful cards as a result.
So, would you advocate a Birds of Paradise in a green-white aggressive deck?
Yeah, I mean, I think Birds is great.
Birds still holds a sword.
Birds holds a sword. It doesn't hold a Jeep, but it holds everything else.
Yeah, it eventually does. So, we've ranked our mana fixing. 5 out of 10. I mean, if we were using the previous decks and archetypes we talked about, I don't know. I might go a little bit lower than that. I think that a little bit more as a ways on, you know, how many of the green aggressive creatures came your way and you drafted versus how many white aggressive creatures you came and you drafted. I don't think you need to go super high and slam the Savannah early.
I mean, also a lot of the good cards, like what we talked about, the green-white cards specifically, like the gold cards, are all good in this deck.
Yeah.
Like Gaddock Teague, Knight of the Reliquary, Loxodon Spider. So you need green-white early as well.
Or just the green Suns.
Well, okay, sure.
Okay, so cards that are going to push me into this particular archetype are going to be those green and white utility creatures. Things like Pride Mage are very strong. Knight of the Reliquary is very strong. Gaddock Teague, I also love him a lot there, even if you don't have the awkward Green Sun Zenith interaction with that card. There should be a cute Q errata that you can still cast just Green Sun Zenith under Gaddock Teague. That would make the world a much better place. But it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So... yeah, green-white, I think there's an aggressive deck, I think there is a tokens deck, and I think there is a ramp deck for Celestia that's been effective, that's been winning, that we've seen kind of more in a general state.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the next guild, we have the Gruul, and I think this is pretty clearly 2 decks.
Yeah.
We've got ramp, which we covered a lot.
Well, and more specific, it's a more specific niche version of ramp, i.e., the wildfire deck.
I don't think it's always that.
I think that's where you want to be.
You can just make a big fireball.
I think you'd rather make it wildfire.
I mean, maybe depends on what you're playing against.
But like, okay, I think green red works best as the wildfire pairing because green has so many guys that live through wildfire.
And red. Yeah. Yes. No, I agree with you.
Like
green red.
Urnham Dijin, Deadbridge Goliath, for instance. You know, going up even higher than that, or stuff like Thrag Tusk, who's also sweet with wildfire, and like being able to ramp your mana in such a way that you can cast wildfire earlier, and it affects your opponent to such a greater degree than it affects you. Like makes green red. I think if you want to be a green red like big spells deck, I think you definitely want the wildfires, and I think that's where you want to try and set it up to be.
And it's interesting to me because I don't think you need to snag wildfire and then snag red green ramp spells in order to make a deck.
No, you can
definitely do it in the other direction.
Yeah,
I think you could just take the ramp of green. Now with red, it almost opens up red's possibilities because you can take the more of the spot removal, cheap burn spells to deal with early threats against you, but you're also getting the most value out of the X burn spells out of red.
Yeah,
because you're going to have a ton of mana.
Like Bonfire is excellent.
Yeah,
but Comet Storm, like especially the ones that are like.
But I want to go as narrow as possible and say things like Demon Fire and Fireball are at their best in a red-green deck.
I mean, you can certainly cast them for the most.
Right. That's exactly what I want to do with an X spell.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily agree that they're at their best here, just because I typically think that the best place for the X spells are as aggro finishers that you can occasionally cast as removal early.
Not necessarily as a finisher for just a deck.
I mean, it's fine as a finisher for a deck, but like if you can already...
You don't look at Banefire and be like, oh, well, I've drafted
the way I look
ramp
at
spells, and this is my Akroma, this is my Sphinx of Jor-El, this is my Gristlebrand.
I mean, if your opponent is at 7 or something, then yeah, that's sweet. But a lot of times, like, I don't find myself in situations where like my deck's game plan is to dump a ton of lands into play and then fire off Fireball, Comet Storm, and Demon Fire at my opponent's face, in succession.
Those are sweet games
to kill them. Like that very rarely, if ever, happens.
When was the last time that you like cast Fireball for 10 and just said go?
Like it's been a long,
I've definitely done it. I've definitely done it.
But I mean, like I think
Rizzo's Rage is one we haven't seen in a while.
Rage is sweet.
Card just doesn't come up very often.
I mean, I love Rage just because it kind of works the same way.
We can name big damage spells all we want,
but I mean, like I think like really where this color combination, what you want to be doing in ramp is, you've got efficient removal in red, cheap burn and or like power sweepers, right? Earthquake, rolling earthquake, wildfire.
I just want you to acknowledge that you're making a case for exactly what I'm talking about.
No, because you're talking about using X spells as like your end game.
Yeah, I am.
Is burning your opponent out.
Right.
I'm talking about being able to use them effectively in the early and mid game to deal with your opponent's threats.
Yeah, you can still do that. you're valuing them a little bit higher. That's my point. Because you're going to get the most value out of them.
Sure.
Like, okay, you've earthquaked away your opponent's guys. Now you can burst them for 4, stagger shock them for 4, fireball them for 10.
Like, yeah, but that just never seems to really happen. Like, that is a very ideal situation where you're just using, like, giant burn spells to set your opponent on fire.
I think it happens more often than you're giving credit for at this moment.
I feel like it's more often the case that you're using red to survive the early and mid game, and then you're just dropping huge dragon bombs on people in the late game.
Out of red?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, they do have more dragons than, let's say, white. As good comments from the chat, that in many ways, the green ramp decks can feel all the same. They can feel like they're different.
Green X. Like, green whatever.
So what makes the red one different from the white one, and most notably so, is that you're not going board sweeper into big white finisher. You're going early, trade in your Path to Exile for a Lightning Bolt, clear stuff out with Earthquake, and then if you can't wildfire them, try to get them with the burn spells. And I think there are more options there which is what I'm getting at.
And I mean, the green-red ramp deck also takes advantage of a lot of the. I mean, red is obviously slanted very aggressively right now, in terms of the card choices.
Yeah, and that's...
But there are still like there's Hellkite Charger. There's Thundermaw Hellkite's good everywhere.
but Garden Hellkite's a good example. You're talking about like dropping dragons on.
This is the best deck to take advantage of the big, expensive red bomb creatures that are left. But Garden Hellkite, Hellkite Charger, stuff like that, like just the huge dragons that are still Inferno Titan.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, he's real good in that deck.
Yeah, so like you get to take cards and you get to utilize a number of cards that aren't necessarily going to be popular or go into a lot of other decks. Like there are not a ton of decks that want or can play stuff like Hellkite Charger or Begarden Hellkite. And in this deck, that's like exactly what you want.
And decks won't stretch for them, as they will stretch for a card like Inferno Titan. And
Right.
Knowing that in the draft order and how you evaluate cards is very important.
It's like,
so I will give you that ideally, Wildfire is where you want to be for the red-green ramp deck. That is definitely an element that makes it very different from a green-white ramp deck as we go through the various flavors of ramp.
It plays almost more like combo, in a way.
It can. I think you're talking a lot about ideal circumstances and not the reality of playing a deck where you don't have card draw and card selection like you do the other colors.
Correct.
So the thing about playing a red-green Wildfire deck effectively is that you want to make sure you evaluate that value that spot removal high enough, and you could live long enough to be like, okay, well I didn't get Wildfire till turn 9. It's not as good.
It's still
doing something.
Exactly.
Getting me back in a game if I've fallen behind, maybe like really closing out an opponent who I've LD'd through other ways.
Right.
So, that said, mana fixing on a scale of 1 to 10 in a red-green deck, I'm going to say is really low.
Oh, yeah. I mean, most of the red spells you want are either single red or late-game spells. And again, you're playing ramp. Your cards like Cultivate and Rampant Growth and Kadama's Reach. And
this deck might play Form of the Dragon, but even then, you're not worried about getting 3 red.
No, because... you can always get it if you want it.
So
all your cards fix your mana.
While I mildly disagreed with the giving a 1 to green-white ramp, I will give a 1 out of 10 to Gruul ramp.
Very low.
Yeah. And then cards we would look for, the Wildfires are the most key to go into this archetype.
Wildfire, Burning of Zinyi.
Yeah.
Earthquake, Rolling Earthquake.
Rolling Earthquake is an excellent one here. Rolling Earthquake's pretty diverse, but as you get more of these cards into your pool, let's say you take Cultivate Rolling Earthquake, this is the deck I would want to be in.
I think it's also really important. One of the cards that I really like in this deck that I think is important is Oracle of Moldiah, because it's a source of kind of a source of card advantage in a color pairing that has very little of it. Like, it's not actually. It's kind of drawing you cards in a way.
Right, yeah.
Like being able to play off the top of your deck is good. Like
Huntmaster the Fell is also very good here to point out. If we're going to talk about creatures,
yeah.
Similar to the green-white, where I don't. Oh no, I'm afraid to click on Evan's link.
That is horrifying. Anyway,
those are the people on the internet that aren't watching this don't get to laugh when we get to have. So, I think we've covered it. I think that, again, with the creatures being a liability in these green ramp decks, Oracle is a bit sketchy for me in that set of circumstances. I like Oracle in like green-blue decks.
Yeah, but if it's like shot you ahead,
no, it's still good
to the point where
any time we talk about a green ramp deck, Harmonize is such a high pick.
Oh yeah,
you need that card. You're going to want to cast it on turn 3 every day. You're going to refill your hand.
Yeah, it's so difficult to find sources of pure card advantage.
It almost makes me want to play more like Momentous Fall type cards, but it's just not good enough.
My Elder is another great card for this.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of there's just a lot of there's so much redundancy in the green ramp. Like, there are cards that are sweet and they stand out because they're so good, but a lot, like right below that, is just a ton of every all the Cultivates and the Rampant Growth and the Harrow and they all are very similar.
Yeah, I mean, another day we'll talk about 5-color green based ramp, and again, it'll be one of those times where hopefully you have enough information at that point to really know that'll help with pick order and evaluation of where to move in different directions and how to get there. But the Wildfires coupled with the Cultivates, that's perfect. Well, talking about the other side of the coin for the Gruul decks, which is clearly aggro.
Yeah.
It is clearly where we want our Burning Tree Shamans, our Stormbinds, our Gorklan Rampagers, our Goblin Guides, and our Slaughterhorns?
Slaughterhorde, Wolfear Avenger.
Wolfear Silverheart.
Wolfear, oh yeah, there's a good one.
Yeah, this guy with anybody with trample is real hot. This deck, again, maybe it has some more 6 casting cost cards in it than a lot of the other aggressive decks, because your mana guys are going to double up there. Deadbridge Goliath is obviously huge in decks like this. It seems like it's self-explanatory. I don't think
Yeah, I mean...
the draft order doesn't change too much for me when drafting red-green aggro.
I feel like that this deck always starts...
Bloodbraid Elf, sorry. How did we forget Bloodbraid Elf?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't want to say always, but I feel like this deck almost always starts red, and you fall backwards into green. Like, you have a lot of aggressive... You have the Lightning Bolts and the Magma Jets, whatever, and then you have, like, red aggressive creatures. You know, you've got your Goblin Guide and your Hell Rider and whatever else. And then, like, oh, hey, here's a Slaughterhorn, or, oh, hey, here's a Bloodbraid Elf, or, oh, hey, there was nothing in this pack, so I took there was a Stomping Ground or something. Like, you know, you kind of... It ends up... It's, like, red... It's base red... Little bit of green.
Yeah, I'll give you that. It's
very rare, like base green, little bit of red.
Yeah, that happens a lot more infrequently. So,
Gorklan Rampager is very good.
Yeah, that card's just awesome in general.
Like playable combat tricks in Cube are hard to come by. Hence, like Slaughterhorn and
yeah, I mean, I love both those cards because they're either a efficiently costed man or they're a sweet combat trick, and the only way the Gruul moves, which is into the red zone.
Yeah,
they work out very well.
Yeah, Rampager is very, very good.
I don't think there's a whole lot to say beyond that. I mean, I like the red. I mean, Solifuge. I mean, all of if you look at just the red green cards in the gold section.
This is also the deck where Thundermaw Hellkite is best because you can cast it faster.
True.
Like being able to cast Hellkite on turn 4, God forbid turn 3.
What's the name of the clan leader from Gruul?
Boribugos or whatever the hell?
Yeah, that guy costs $1 million, doesn't he?
8.
Oh, goof. Never...
Nope.
And then he does something and you can Seismic Assault or something?
So he throws lands for Lightning Bolts, and when he does damage to a player, you look at the top 3 cards, and you put all lands revealed that way into your hand. He's a 6/7 trample.
Okay, for 8.
He also costs 8 goddamn mana, so he's not getting in.
Yeah, it's a little much. I mean, Domri Raid, I think, would be the only other card to really talk about that we haven't really played around with. At the end of the day, for Gatecrash, when we expanded the gold section, we ended up going with Stormbind over Domri Raid, and I stand by it, and I like it.
I mean, they do different things. I think Stormbind's important in that deck just because it gives you a sweet way to close the game.
Yeah, it's like as much as Domri Raid is kind of a removal spell for creatures that may be in your way, or a bit of another card advantage tool. There we go. It's like a thing that puts cards in your hand. It's just not like turning all your cards into shocks is good, as we've tried to point out with Seismic Assault. Yeah. Very good. I lost a game during tonight's Cube League where my opponent sacrificed their Academy Rector. They looked at my life total. It was 10. They had 4 cards in their hand.
Yeah.
They put Stormbind into play. Shoot, 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 shoot. Draw, shoot, 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 shoot. They're like, ah, darn it.
Yeah.
That was cool. I'm going to go ahead and link the cube list.
Yeah. Anyone wants to see the cube list, it's in the channel info.
If you go to the channel info, it will bring up...
it's got a list of
and for those listening after the fact, or elsewhere, if you go to twitch.tv/Eckamon, don't ask.
It's there.
If you go to the info, it'll bring you to...
It's on the blog, it's on the MTG Cast info, it's on...
It's everywhere.
Yeah, we try and make it as public.
Yeah, up to 700 robust Magic cards featuring a full-blown gold section. Let's move on to our next guild, the Rakdos.
So I think
the Rakdos, as much as I feel like they only play one way, I'm still going to say they have 2 distinct decks.
Yeah, I feel like... I mean, there's an aggro deck. and more like.
Let's just stop right there.
Yeah.
Oh wait, did we finish with the Gruul? Let's go back real quick. Mana fixing for Gruul aggressive on a scale 1 to 10.
Slightly important, just because it's an aggressive deck, so you need to hit your colors early. You don't want to stumble.
We did mention that it's usually most one color and not so much the other color. It's very rarely that you end up 50-50 as far as cards in your deck. I would give this one a 3.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, it's relevant, but it's not the end of the world if you don't have it. Especially because you're going to be like...
And we've mentioned every card under the sun that would be going into that archetype, so...
Right, so, Rakdos.
Don't want to miss anything. I should have made notes for this. Rakdos, aggressive Rakdos is the most obvious. It's the most in your face. And Return to Ravnica really, really pushed that. Being able to add cards like Gorehouse Chainwalker to your cube.
Rakdos Cackler.
Yeah, it really just, it almost put this archetype on the map, as where before it was a little bit of a lacking. Like, you didn't really understand where red and black had interactions in cube.
I think Rakdos might actually be the king of the 2-power 1-drops.
Oh, it might? Definitely.
I mean, the only thing that comes close is anything with white.
Boros.
Yeah, like Boros or Orzhov.
Not even Orzhov.
Yeah, I mean,
No.
I think, this is the absolute lowest, fastest, cheapest, you want all your guys, you want your Rakdos Cackler, Goblin Guide, Gorehouse Chainwalker, Carnophage, Bloodghast.
When these decks come together, they can be brutal, because this is the 2-color combination that has all the 2-power guys for 1 and all the 3-power guys for 2.
Yeah.
So that being said, it's pretty easy to evaluate where the cards come from this deck, but it's a little more important to evaluate the fixing, because you're going to end up in a lot of circumstances where you're going to have Goblin Guide into into Wretched Anurid, into Liliana Spectre, hopefully into Hellrider.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fixing is much more important in this deck just because the curve is so low, so any time that you stumble is going to have a much larger impact on your game plan, whereas... the slower deck is, the less important the fixing is, because you have time to draw out of it.
Or the more one-sided the color is in the deck.
Right.
Now, Rakdos aggressive decks will generally, they can come in 50-50, unlike what the Gruul decks will generally be. But there'll be a lot of times where it can be 80-20, 90-10. It can almost be like, oh, I went aggro black, and then I ended up with like a Lightning Bolt, Falcon Wrath, Aristocrat.
Or your aggro red splashing Dark Confidant.
That also happens.
Like, that happens a lot. The other thing about Rakdos that is sweet is that this is also the king of the land destruction deck. If you want to play that,
well, that's the other. I think that's the other distinct deck.
No, that's the other deck.
So I think in aggro Rakdos, you could be all spells that cost 3 or less. Maybe you've got Falcon Wrath Aristocrat. Maybe you've got, I don't even know what the other 4 drops would be. I got Hellrider,
Hero
Oxid Ridge, Desecration Demon, Juzam Jin. But you could really, this is a deck you can really get away with playing all the cheap stuff, and to me that makes cards like Ankh of Mishra, Sphere of Resistance even better for a deck like this. And those are cards that you're going to be able to move out of your seemingly color constraints to pick up other really key stuff. Cards like Curse Scroll.
Right, Curse Scroll is really good here just because you're vomiting your hand in play.
Yeah.
You want... The biggest problem with the Rakdos deck is that you really want to overload on cheap little guys, because that's what you always want to have, like a 2-power guy on turn 1 and a 3-power guy on turn 2. And since you have to play so many, you run the risk of having like literally nothing to do at 4 mana or more. And if the game goes that long, you're in some trouble because you're playing 2/2s and your opponent is dropping.
There are only so many Kargan Dragon Lords and Curse Scrolls in the cube.
Exactly.
I was going to say
that's why they're so important.
Right.
What I'm saying.
So I would say mana fixing, that brings it up to like it could be a 6.5 out of 10.
It's really important. I think you're going to look at a lot of hands where it's things like Goblin Guide, Bloodghast, or Carnophage, Slith Firewalker, or there's just so much.
And you want to keep those hands. You want to play those hands.
Right. You don't want to mulligan.
I mean, playing a turn 4 Slith Firewalker is just ugh.
It's the worst. So I think the mana fixing is really important. Like it's not the be all end all, but it's certainly what's going to make it's going to separate good Rakdos decks from great ones, or bad ones from playable ones. Like the decks when I end up drafting this, when I don't have like at least like 2 or 3 dual lands, or ways to get both colors, tend to fail.
And it's also difficult because these decks really want the Strip Mine and the Wasteland and the Tech Edge.
Right.
But they want me because they're not going to have spells that cost so much mana. They want to be disruptive.
Right.
And not
you want to play all these colorless lands in your...
So Sam in the chat has mentioned that he would say this color combination is an easy 10 out of 10 for mana fixing, and that he wants to know if there are any that we would actually rank a 10 out of 10.
There's one.
Definitely there's one. And as far as it being a 10, it can be depending on how the draft goes. As I mentioned earlier, Rakdos decks can often they can be 80-20, they can be 90-10 on a particular color because aggro black and aggro red can be so much their own thing. Like, you want to play the deck with Ball Lightning, you want to play the deck with Growl's Messenger, you're probably not going to play the deck with both under any circumstances. Maybe, but that seems very rare.
I mean, a lot of times, like, you'll be mono red and you'll splash a Dark Confidant or something else to do in black, just a little bit. Or you'll be mono black and you want like a bolt or two, or Chain Lightning or Magma Jet or whatever. And like then the fixing's not as big of a deal.
And the important thing to say is that the aggro creatures of the opposite color become so much worse when you go that 80-20, 90-10 route. Like, now I've got all these sweet black creatures, and then you've got a Goblin Guide, and you're like, this just doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, and especially, like, Goblin Guide is the best aggressive creature in Q, I feel.
That is a bold statement.
I am fine with making it.
It feels like it's been a while. You're just casually dropping that. I don't know if I believe in that one.
2 power haste for 1 mana. It is
either way. That's
absolutely key.
That's the important thing. We've already got more mileage out of this particular topic than I thought we were going to. But I don't think I would crank it all the way up that high on the mana fixing importance. But when you do factor in that if you can have access to Port, Wasteland, Strip Mine, Tectonic Edge, then you do kind of need to increase your fixing.
Yeah. The more colorless lands you want to play, the more important it is that the lands you do have the tap for colored mana and tap for both.
Yep, there you go. So, from aggressive red-black, we have what seems maybe more like a mid-range red-black, maybe more like all that red-black can do for you. Maybe my favorite deck.
No, I know what your favorite deck is. It's not this one.
I know.
Your favorite deck is blue-white land destruction.
But here we have
returning Chaos Orb all day.
And Strip Mine.
Yeah.
Here we have land destruction in its I wouldn't say its purest form, but I would say it's most cultivated, it's most extracted and turned streamlined.
You're talking about this like a fine wine.
It is. It's years of making this come together and work, because there was a time.
So much tinkering and slow adjustments, subtle notes. It's very key.
All right. There are a ton of cards. We could talk about everything between Sinkhole and Ogre Arsonist and Kiki Jiki in between. An easy way to draft this deck is you take the card that says destroy a land on it, that it's red or black.
This is the deck also where if you ever want to discourage someone from playing Magic with you, draft this deck.
Yeah, I do feel kind of bad. Remember that kid like a month ago?
Yeah, he was not happy.
Yeah, Wilson. I wasn't in the draft. I was just over somebody's shoulder, and I may or may not have nudged the person who's over our shoulder into taking a few of the more correct cards to make this deck happen. So he had one of the more Nutsor red-black LD decks. His first round opponent was playing this weird Grixis splashing Aurelia's Fury deck. He just got steamrolled.
I think so. I mean, anything that says destroy a land on it is something you want for this deck, and I think that just because of the nature of land destruction, things that go up in value on top of just the generalized land destruction spells are especially acceleration. Being able to it's kind of hard to get, and I mean obviously boxes are very good, go figure, but being able to start destroying land a turn faster is so much more important than...
I mean, it's a powered cube. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about my own cube is that I feel like with all the moxes and all the brown accelerants that are out there, you also have access to cards like Smash to Smithereens, which really punish the people for kind of doing those things. Edmund has posted another pic.
That's terrifying. I'm not going to sleep tonight after looking at that.
How dare he make me laugh? He's just going to keep doing it.
Mana fixing on a scale of 1 to 10 in this deck is I would say
7.
I would say 8.
Yeah, it's probably an 8 when you have all those lands that you want to take
Sinkhole into
desperately.
Molten Rain. And you want to play Wasteland Strip Mine.
Yeah,
it's
more
you
important.
need the Blood Crypt, you need the Badlands, you need the Bloodstained Mire. In fact, you need more fetch lands to go get your Badlands.
Yeah.
You really, really, really.
But this is a deck where I would take the Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse a little bit higher. Because I know what turns I'm doing stuff.
Sure, but I just think, you really need the fixing to make this deck work. Especially because,
Yeah. I'll destroy lands. You can give me whatever you want.
Alright.
So, we've got the scale. Let's talk key cards that push me into drafting red-black land destruction.
I don't think you need any key cards. I think you'll just do it.
So I pose it more of a question to you.
Okay. Especially the marquee land destruction spells, stuff like Sinkhole.
Sinkhole is a little rougher because, when I look at it, I want to draft more like an NBA deck. But if I go Stone Rain, Ankh of Mishra, Avalanche Riders
is
Molten
really
Rain.
clear. Even though it costs 4. Molten Rain's very good. Army Ants, new inclusion.
Yeah, Army Ants gets it done. That's one of those cards that's still right now, you can just casually wheel that card around. No one's looking at it like a threat. In the deck that I was over the shouldering, I think that was the first week we had Army Ants. So it was Ankh, Sphere, Stone Rain, Sinkhole, Army Ants, Avalanche Riders, Ravenous Baboons, Ogre Arsonist.
This is also, speaking of those cards, this is also one of the decks where Kiki Jiki is great.
Oh, so...
Because, you've got Goblin Settler, Goblin Arsonist, or Ogre Arsonist, excuse me, Ravenous Baboons, Avalanche Riders. You have so many, guys that destroy lands that Kiki Jiki just becomes, a ridiculous engine for that.
It's a finisher, really, is what it is. It just closes out the game.
It just locks them out of being able to do anything so quickly.
Yeah.
The game gets away from them fast if you have Kiki Jiki in anything like that.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, that it's an easier one to evaluate. I think I don't need you to go into detail too much on.
Read card. If it says destroy land, take card. Repeat 45 times.
People have definitely shown up to Cube, done that, and had success.
Yep.
So.
All right, and
that's it for Rakdos, really.
Yeah.
Rakdos is aggressive. It's aggressive in different flavors, I guess.
Yeah.
What flavor would you like your aggressive?
It destroys creatures. It destroys lands. It destroys faces.
It just makes or even so much destroy creatures. Always this is makes big fast.
Yeah.
Go beat.
Very eloquent.
Thank you. The Dimir.
So, Dimir has, I would say, a number of different. I would say 3. Maybe
you would say 3?
4.
Wow. I was thinking we're saying most popular and also successful. Because to me that's 2 decks.
Yeah, it's definitely got, I would say, then 3.
Well, let's start with probably the most combo-y and probably the most I would hope is the most obvious, and that would be Reanimator.
Yeah.
This is the 2-color combination that is best for Reanimator.
And it's very easy to figure out why. Blue is a great color at digging for individual cards and putting cards in your graveyard, and black is where all the reanimation is. So this is where you want to be. Stuff, Frantic Search, Forbidden Alchemy, both great.
Strategic Planning. The All-Stars of Blue with the Thirst for Knowledges, the Compulsive Researches, the Fact or Fictions.
Nephalia Drown Yard.
Yeah, you can Drown Yard yourself. You can Drown Yard your opponent. It becomes an excellent extra win condition for the Reanimator decks. This one, it seems elementary to us. There's also the discard outlets in the form of Psychotog. Is that the only one that's specifically blue-black? You could even recoil yourself if you really need to.
Desperate Times, call for desperate measures. There's just a number of great enablers that work in both colors, I think, and just being able to, even stuff like Impulse and just the generalized card draw, just digging you for your pieces, your discard outlets, your reanimation targets,
And let it not be overlooked that you also have access to Body Double.
Yeah.
Which is another...
Body Double's fine.
It's better than fine.
It's
it's 2 cards.
It's an additional reanimation spell, kind of. Yeah. For the chat, there's no Storm in our queue. Storm is a thing in some cubes. I don't like it.
It feels like it's a longer discussion for another day, but if I was to try to simplify it, in my experience, unless you have really, really pushed it and made a small cube for it and made a lot of outlets for it, Storm just doesn't come together often enough, and also
it requires so many bad cards.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Bad cards.
Preston would sit around all day and try to convince me to put in like Seething Song, Pyritic Ritual.
Fuck that.
And it would just be like, so what happens every other day of the week when someone doesn't just force it, and then let's say they don't even get there? No, you'll be able to, like, nothing. I mean, I've played a combo cube before. It's a different kind of fun. I wouldn't want it every day of the week. It's not my breakfast cereal of choice.
Yeah.
But from time to time, you want a bowl of Reese's Puffs, and you're like, oh, this is different. Not for breakfast, but whatever.
Candy for breakfast?
Yeah.
Whoa. Anyway, so the Reanimator deck, I think...
And this is just like drafting Reanimator in general, almost. The signs are there for, pick up the outlet, pick up the enabler, pick up the fatty.
It's funny because Reanimator almost to me feels like when I'm trying to evaluate like when you draft what piece, I almost feel like the cards to like your discard outlets or your ways to get things into your yard are almost more important than the targets you're reanimating or your reanimation spells. Because like so often I feel like I've got this sweet Reanimator deck. I've got all the bombing. I've got the Inkwell Leviathan, and I've got all the other sweet targets to put back into play and all this stuff. And then I've got the Reanimate, the Animate Dead, and the Dance the Dead. And I've got like 2 ways to get them into my graveyard, and it sucks.
That sounds like you're just bad, but I could be wrong.
It's one of those things where you kind of like skimp on taking the discard outlets / the milling kind of stuff at your peril.
I will definitely say that is the number one pitfall of player. No, that's not probably the number one. That's one of the major pitfalls of players trying to draft Reanimator in Cube is they overlook the outlets.
Yeah, outlets are really important.
They're like, oh, I've got this spaghetti monster and I've got this necromancy or corpse dance. Like, I'm sure it'll work.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like, maybe that's a bad example, but there are a lot of times where players will just lose with their fatties in their hand. They can't do anything about it.
Right, and it's there's just not a ton of cards that are really efficient and good at getting your own stuff into your graveyard. So it's important to take them when they present themselves. There
have been times where Careful Study has been in the cube. It's not there now, and blue, again, is a hard party to break into.
If you wanted to
think about it like that.
Right.
Think about it like, I need Careful Studies.
Right. Looter kind of effects are very, Looter Ilkor is like one of the sweetest cards for that deck, It
can be. The fact that when you cast it, it doesn't put a card in your graveyard is rough.
No, but it's very important, to have stuff like that, where you've got, like Frantic Search is extremely
very good.
Forbidden Alchemy is very important. Cards
very
like that.
Yeah.
You need, not just the ability to discard, but the ability to search for your stuff actively, because ideally, the whole point of Reanimator is getting the stuff into play as fast as possible to cheat it in play and win off the fact that you're casting giant guys 5, 6, 7 turns.
There have definitely been cube games where I'm at 7 mana, 4 of it being black, looking at Gristlebrand in my hand, being like, well, I could jump for a few hoops and put this guy to play. Or I could untap and draw for my turn, and if it's a land, it'll just come into play.
Yeah, like, that, and that's definitely one of the things where, like, especially, I feel like in the Reanimator deck, there's, like, the least important thing, in my opinion, are the targets. Because there are so many awesome ones.
Fat creatures.
Like, yeah, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference if you're reanimating a Chroma versus Gristlebrand versus Terastodon versus, like, obviously some are better than others.
And some of them have pro-black, which could be a liability.
Right. Sphinx of the Steelwind, also good. But, like, for the most part, they're kind of interchangeable, and because you're looking for the most expensive spells that not a lot of other people want, you can kind of get them later. Like, you don't have to... There are some, obviously, that are going to be popular, and you need to draft highly, but for the most part, you can skimp on those and take other stuff ahead of time, take the enablers before.
Alright, let's get back to the meat and potatoes of this topic. Mana fixing for a Reanimator deck.
I mean, it's not that big a deal, I don't feel.
A lot of the cards that make the deck really good are single blue and single black.
Yeah.
Like sure, maybe you need a careful consideration.
I mean...
Maybe you need a Jason Mind Sculptor to put that fatty back on the top of your deck and get it out of your hand.
Sure.
So you can then mill it, but...
I don't think that it's, like, the end of the world if you don't end up with the Watery Grave and the Underground Sea.
No, I mean, it's definitely one of those luxuries that you would like to have, and maybe will do something. I'd say it's a middle-of-the-road kind of thing. It's a 5 out of the 10 to me.
Yeah. It's a nice thing to have, but it's not the end of the world if you don't have it.
Yep. And then as far as cards...
I feel like they're pretty obvious. Again, I would rate...
I mean, you just had a long soliloquy on how much you want enablers.
Yeah.
So, in the X world of reanimation spells and discard outlets, enablers, are more important than...
I mean, especially because the enablers help you find your reanimation spells more often than not.
Yeah.
Stuff like Frantic Search, like, digs through your deck to get you to reanimate, or to dance the dead, or to animate dead.
But, Eck, how do I evaluate Stinkweed Imp?
Stinkweed Imp is a totally okay but very slow way of going about it.
You don't entomb him on turn 1?
That's bold. That is bold.
But why wouldn't I entomb the thing I wanted to reanimate?
So, I mean, Stinkweed Imp is fine, but again, like, Stinkweed Imp is never a part of an ideal reanimator.
Alright, we don't need to go off deep about it. That was just an example.
Yeah.
So we get it. Reanimator is great. It's fun. It's Dimir very much. I would say that the other side of the coin when it comes to Dimir blue-black decks from Cube, it's got to be Control. It's got to be much more of that classic... You know, it doesn't have to necessarily be Tog Upheaval, but it's definitely like spot kill your guy, counter your spell, play something you can't deal with. Good
Discard
luck.
your hand.
Yeah, well, that's lucky.
I mean, like, yeah, you've got a grip of Doom Blades and another grip of counter spells, and
you cast Moloku with 11 mana up.
Yeah, like, it's very similar in a lot of ways to White-Blue.
Similar but different, and let's go over the differences.
Typically, in Blue-Black, you have some degree of tutoring.
Yeah, so that's like more of the advantage side.
Right.
But it's possibly...
It also means you could run more niche...
Silver bullet type cards.
Yeah, like, not that there are a ton of them in Cube, but, like, you can get away with... You don't need multiples of a lot of stuff if you have the ability to search for them.
I'm going to be as bold as to say that Blue-Black is an inferior control deck than Blue-White.
Yeah, I mean...
White's Planeswalkers are better. White's enchantments are better. Better at dealing with answers. Better at being answers, dealing with problems. I mean, not to knock good old Blue-Black control, which we've known for a long time and have been great friends with, but you got to work for it more.
I feel like, especially with the way Cube is set up, I feel like as a strict control shell, Blue-Black is more creature-based, and that's just kind of a function of you have fewer sweepers. Like, other than Damnation, there's not a lot right now in Black and Cube, but, like...
We did lose Decree of Pain recently.
Stuff like Shriekmaw and Necrotal and Predatory Night Stalker.
Skin
Render. Like, you've got a large amount of dudes that double as removal in the Blue-Black deck, whereas that's not necessarily a very common occurrence in the White-Blue deck. The White-Blue deck is much more spell-based, and, like... It's much... I feel like White-Blue is very much like Drago.
Instead of Necrotal's 2 through 4, after Fiend Hunter, you have Oblivion Ring 2 through 4.
Sure.
I mean, these are just all sound like cases to me where Blue-White is a better control deck, but I'm not here to knock it. I'm just saying that when you draft Blue-Black control, you kind of have to evaluate things a little bit differently. And the Blue-Black cards out of the gold section of Cube are more of kind of a strange menagerie of things.
Right, they're all over the map.
Yeah, I mean, you got Shadow Mage Infiltrator, you've got Recoil, you've got Duskmantle Seer, you've got Psychotog, you've got Soul Manipulation.
Soul Manipulation is a sweet one. And also plays well into the, like, Shriek Maws.
Yeah. Remove Soul your guy, raise dead my 187 guy.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think Blue-Black tends to be more of a... In general, like, fewer counterspells, more, like, value guys, more spells on your own turn.
Value answers.
Yeah. Skin Render, stuff like that. any recursion also plays well into that. Usually because you have a lot of value guys too.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the more of the niche opportunities to kind of get things out of something like Corpse Dance when you have all these kind of 187 cards. Yeah, I enjoyed that as well.
Yeah.
Is there a whole lot more to say here? Let's see.
I mean,
fixing on a scale of 1 to 10 for a blue-black control deck. I mean, you're going to want to have Counterspell. You might want to have access to double black things. I mean, it's probably closer to a 7 out of 10.
I don't know if I'd go that high. There's much less double black that you really want, other than like Liliana. Veil.
You just said Skinrender, Predatory Nightstalker, Necrotal.
Yeah.
And you need all the hard.
None of those cards.
You need all the hard counters out of blue to make your.
You need the hard counters, sure, but it's not like important that you curve out with like Necrotal, Predatory Nightstalker, etc., etc. Like
yeah, but any deck playing Cryptic Command, you can just get casually boned by not having triple blue on turn 7.
Sure. I mean, that's certainly a thing that can happen. I think that Dimmer can get away with not a ton of it. And it's just the nature of the speed of the deck. Like, you know, the faster a deck is, the more mana fixing it needs. Like, look at Rakdos. You know, as a control-based archetype, it's not as important because you have so much more time. The way your deck is built, it doesn't punish you as badly.
But you're run the risk of being more punished by not having the double or triple at the time you need it. Certainly. Because you're going to die.
Oh, okay, yes, sure.
And in a blue-black deck, I'd like the opportunity to run Necropotence.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fine place for it. I mean, provided you have somewhere to recoup the life, which is a hard thing to get in black and blue.
Yeah.
But, I mean...
It feels like I just end up shitting on blue-black control. It feels like it's only gotten worse as Magic has kind of moved on.
And I mean, like, I honestly, where I really think... I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily what I would consider like a popular or successful archetype yet, but I kind of see where the future of where blue-black is going is like this, like kind of like a Duskmantle Seer, Shadow Mage Infiltrator, like guy, like creature-based, like kind of aggressive, kind of mid-rangey value stuff, and a lot of disruption, like counterspells and discard to go with like your sweet little like looters and magpie effects and stuff like that.
There aren't any magpies left.
Well, Shadow Mage is like that effect.
I don't know. I mean, I could definitely see a world where we just go back to the blue-black section in gold, chop some shitty creatures, and just put like Spite, Malice, Undermine back in, and just be like, here are some control cards. Not a fan.
It's just not that exciting. I don't need I just don't feel that like it's super important to have multiple different, very kind of similar control archetypes all be heavily supported. Like, you should be able to play blue-black control, but it should not be the only thing the blue-black gold cards are doing in Cube. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, it's one thing to talk about when looking at the gold section of your own Cube is, why are those cards there? Because in many ways, for us, they're just the best cards in Magic. They're not necessarily running with a particular draft archetype or theme that you want to be pushing or even be aware of. And I think Dimir, or Blue-Black, is a great example of that, where it's kind of a strange hodgepodge of guys that are in there. I mean, it's like, I love Shadow Mage, I love Psychotog, I love Recoil, I enjoy Duskmantle Seer.
Oh, I love Duskmantle Seer.
But again, I think it could be a good opportunity. Maybe we can just kind of go through and make it more control-ish. I love Spite Malice. We haven't played that card in a long time.
Yeah, the card was sweet. I mean, it's like, it's always interesting where you look at you try and keep a lot of parity in Cube, but like certain color combinations lend themselves to being like all the cards do very similar. Like look at White Green, for example. All except for Wake, every card in White Green's like gold section are just like aggressive beaters.
I think of them differently than that. I think of them as kind of like tools in the toolbox that do different things. Gaddock Teague, Kasali Pride Mage. Yeah. Those are tool cards. Knight of the Reliquary, very much so. Right. But I also feel like it's engineered that way. Yeah. Like, you could change the card setup for any of the color combinations for your own cube and really gear how people would draft that color combination. I mean, we could just as easily play cards like Celestian Charm. That would change the landscape.
I mean, you could change a lot of things about any of the color combinations to make it more aggressive, more controlling, more niche archetype supporting, whatever. And I think that, you know, the way the dimmer cards are set up right now is like they're not necessarily the strongest for any one given archetype. They're kind of like they fit into multiple decks. Like, if I'm playing dimmer control, I'm still stoked to have Shadow Mage. Like, it's a sweet source of card advantage.
Can be. It's a bit of a liability. It's funny. It's like I drafted blue-black tonight, and I don't even feel it was that strong. It was mostly black. I was trying to draft like a Living Death deck.
Yeah, I saw like a little bit of...
Yeah, it ended up all right. I had the strategic planning.
It looked okay.
Yeah, I 2-1 the draft. I ended up losing to the Academy Rector for Form of the Dragon deck.
Achievement unlocked.
Ding. Well, actually, in that... I don't remember what else I lost. In that particular game, I Drown Yarded him to 0. Oh, yeah. And then on his upkeep, he hit me for 5. For the last 5 with Form of the Dragon.
Achievement unlocked again. Ding.
So
I mean, like, yeah.
But I was just trying to draft a Living Death deck. Like, that deck didn't necessarily need to be blue-black to me. Like, it was going to be black-based, and then I ended up getting, like, Brainstorm, Ponder, Strategic Planning, Body Double was very strong there.
So what are cards that jump out to you as dimmer control cards like that will push you into that archetype?
Not even Second Talk anymore. Much more like getting it. Let's say I first pick Damnation, second pick Counterspell. Like, so those are things that can happen.
So it's not necessarily like an individual cards.
Yeah,
it's kind of just like falling into your lap, kind of collectively.
Right. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like right now, I'm not actively looking to draft Dimir Control in Cube.
Yeah.
And what I felt like was really important with this style of episode and talking about the two color combinations of the guilds is when you kind of take those cards early, they're just powerful cards. How do you make card evaluations to draft a deck around them?
Yeah.
And for blue-black, you know, maybe your tools aren't just as exciting as blue-white these days, and maybe that means we need to revamp one of those colors, or maybe one of those color combinations to hopefully diversify it and make it do more. And this is one of those circumstances where I actually feel a little bit awkward where you don't have access to something like Decree of Pain.
Yeah, I mean, I love Decree of Pain, and am eagerly awaiting its return.
Well, let's make that happen.
Yeah,
I do like
that.
That
is just too much fun.
Is that the last guild for today?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
we were on for a while, but it's still like it felt like it went really fast.
Well, we had a lot to talk about. But
we do. So next week we'll be back with Enemy Guilds. We'll talk about what's on there. Anything else we're missing?
I don't think so. I mean...
Well, again, we're striving to be here earlier. I know this is very late for the audience and late for us as well. Not exactly...
the most timely thing ever.
No, I mean, but I got to say, with the success of Cube League and having more people come out and more fresher faces we haven't seen to come play with us, it changes it. Thankfully, we didn't go to time 3 rounds in a row with Sensei Dividing Top this week like last week.
That close.
Yeah, it was funny. We were in different pods this week.
Our pod finished like every round in 20 minutes.
Yeah, and then it was always very strange because all of you guys would be watching us and we'd be like, what's going on? And then all of my matches went to tie.
Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully we can have everybody hurry up a little bit and start this a little sooner, and hopefully soon we'll be getting into being able to do things like streaming drafts and...
That's not as exciting for the podcast audience.
No, but I mean, it's exciting in general.
I'm not going to record a Cube Draft via Moto to...
upload the audio. Whee!
Edmund, this is like lunchtime for you. How can you tell me you're going to go to bed?
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, we missed. No Kenny tonight. Usually he's early in Finland. That is true. I'll give you that.
It is early.
But that's the magic of the podcast portion, is that you can now listen to this whenever, wherever, for whatever. But check it out. Check out what is it? EckAmon.blogspot.com.
Yep. All the links are on the info page.
That is the full Monty page.
All the links are everywhere all the time.
Hopefully, although we still get asked. MDG Cast, we are now hosted there. Thank you, MDG Cast, for taking the time to put that stuff together. Although,
Much obliged.
if you are listening to this through MDG Cast, it probably sounds like we're coming to you from some kind of sewer filled with strange rats. So again, if you stop by the main page, you can get everything there. This was not a very visually driven episode, so I won't recommend heading to the YouTube page, where you can also find the video archives for all of those pick packs or versus segments where you want to see all of the sweet MS Paint work that Eck has done to put these things together.
It's a lot of time and not a lot of effort.
Okay. There you have it. I think we have made nods to everything we made nods to. At least we've broken something down on a topic where next week we can come back and everyone knows what to expect.
Exactly. Enemy guilds next week.
Enemy guilds next week, which are, surprise, surprise, a lot more interesting than allied guilds.
Yeah, what do you know?
Allied guilds are pretty meh when it comes to topic, but enemy guilds...
All kinds of business.
Yeah, I already want to do it, but it's past my bedtime.
Yeah. All right.
All right, well, there you have it.